So it's been a while. Today, I'm not here to talk about weight and balance as much as I am to share my super secret little magic formula that I hope is as useful to you as it has been to me. It's a cute little tool, one of the most useful tools that I have come across actually for flying, but I developed it just in experimental aircraft building. Just sat down one day with a calculator for the better part of an afternoon, and I came up with a formula that actually will let you figure ideal weight and balance and load your airplane accordingly, essentially backwards. So rather than, okay, here's this much weight, what's the CG? It lets you pick which CG you would like to fly at, and it has all sorts of applications, especially in experimental aircraft building. But when you're actually flying in the backcountry and trying to figure out, okay, how am I gonna load this caribou up, for instance? Where can I put what, and what's the most I can put there? And it's one of the most useful things I've ever found. And if anyone finds this out on the internet, or it's something you already know, I don't want to hear about it, because, you know, it was a lot of work for me to come up with. I hadn't found it anywhere, and so, you know, you feel like you've invented flubber. So if everybody already knows about this, don't burst my bubble, because it was a discovery for me. So the usefulness of this formula extends actually to aircraft building. So in experimental aircraft building especially. Now in GA, everything is published. So even if what's published doesn't match real world reality, you know, you don't really have a choice. If you don't want to get in trouble, you have to go with what's published. But in experimental aviation, practically nothing is published. And so you have to work up your own CG a lot of times. This is a workup, just quick draw up here on a RANS S21. It's a fantastic airplane. This is not your typical RANS S21. The Blue Northern wasn't either. I'm calling this one the Gray Wolf. It has reinforced baggage area and can handle more weight in its baggage area. So, you know, for FAA purposes, a lot of times you have to do these scenarios. You have to do your fore and aft checks and everything. That can get complicated. Where this formula comes in super handy for me is as a cross-reference for weighing the airplane, because you can actually calculate your tail wheel weight, what it should be, and then weigh it. And when there is a disagreement, in my case, if it disagrees more than about 0.5%, something is wrong. And then you can find it, and always have. Real world scenario, the FAA, I was actually on the phone with them today. Somewhere around here, there's a local builder that is having a hard time with weighing the airplane and getting the CG to work out with really what it should be. So something's wrong, and I shared this with them, and they said, man, would you mind? So I'm going to go over there and help him weigh his airplane, but to find where the problem is, this formula is exactly what I'm going to use. So this is the formula where A is your ideal CG, B is your current CG, C is your original moment, and D equals your arm. Ideal CG means whatever CG you want. So like I like to fly, you know, the Blue Northern especially at like 40 something inches. So 40 inches center of gravity is where it flies really well. If you just want to hit that dead on, which is pretty easy to deviate from in a small airplane, plug in this formula and put your weight right where you want it to get it. So you can take your arm, in this case, let's just figure out, like for the FAA, 270-pound pilots, full fuel, and hit a target CG of maximum, which is 41.92 according to RANS. What's the maximum amount of weight I can have at 84.5 inches? The aft baggage area. So you'll take your ideal or target CG, 41.92 is what we're calling it, minus the CG that you currently have. That equals inches of error. In this case, it's going to be like 3-something inches. Then you take your inches of error, divide it by your existing CG that you have, which is with no baggage. You know, we're trying to figure out how much we can have at that point. Multiply that by your original moment. That equals your difference of moment. Take the difference of moment, divide that by the arm you want to load, in this case 84.5, minus the ideal CG that you want. That equals your maximum weight, or the weight to hit that target CG perfectly. And then you can plug it back into your table. and use it every time. So there would be no point in using this to find 84.5 unless, like the FAA literally said, what's the maximum amount you can put right there. Then you can use it. So as a way to cross-reference, am I in the correct flight attitude? You put it in what you believe to be the correct flight attitude, you know, levels and everything, best you can. You weigh the mains, and then you have the tail wheel propped up with something. The difficulty most people have is weighing all that junk, because a lot of errors can come from that, you know, due to tipping. I mean, how do you hold that? So when you hold the tail real solid, because you don't want this thing falling, how do you really get the exact weight of all that? You can calculate it by knowing the arm, or physically measuring the arm from the datum to the cross member that's holding up the tail wheel. And let's say it's like at 180 inches or 189 inches. You can just take that formula and plug that in, where now in this case, go ahead and, you know, minus what you're missing from your mains. That's the weight at that point. And then just use this formula. So now you would work up your center of gravity at that, but you would want to figure out what's the difference. And so you can actually use this backwards. So it is actually pretty interesting to use. So I'll put that up on just a screen, and you can hit the pause button if you really even care. But it is one of the things that I have found extremely helpful. Okay, so the super cute part of this is plugging this into Excel. Rather than being out there in the sticks, this is how I use it 90% of the time. So here's just an Excel workup. This, you know, is all live readout, and I think everybody understands that on how to weight and balance, plug this into Excel. But the point is here, you can just take 3 little cell blocks, and so we'll make this one desired CG, and we'll make this one the desired arm or loading point, and then we'll call it weight allowed. And so weight allowed will be here, and so we want to plug in a formula here. So we'll say up in our formula column that this is equal to our desired CG, which is this block here, minus our existing CG, which is this block down here, and we'll bracket that. That will give us our difference. That is divided by our existing CG to give us our percentage, which is then multiplied by our existing moment. It would be this block here, and that is divided by the arm desired or loading point, so we'll select this one right here, minus the desired CG, which is the block right above it, and put brackets on that. So there's your little formula up there, and we'll hit enter. So now you can take a desired CG of, say, hey, I want to test this thing at 40 inches. I want to do X at 40 inches. I want to know the stall at 40 inches or 41 inches or 35 inches or whatever. And you can load the airplane there instead of just doing all this trial and error, you know, and moving feed bags and stuff like that. You can just pick a point, say how much weight to get the CG here. And you can, by plugging it into Excel, you can begin to monkey with, you know, the gross weight and all that stuff, and all those numbers will change and shift. So we'll put in a desired CG of 40, and let's figure out here, you know, here's our arms. We've got 84 and 65. This is just the numbers provided by RANS, but we want to know what is to reach this number, and we're going to be loading at 70 inches right in the middle of the baggage area, okay? In order to hit a desired CG of 40, your weight in the baggage area with this current weight loadout right here, you know, one pilot, that's essentially, legally that's METO fuel, but that's an hour's fuel, 100 pounds, and you will hit 40 inches. And you can fly and test elevator configurations and your trim configurations and all that stuff at that CG, and don't necessarily have to have a lot of weight, you know, in the plane to do it. And so you can monkey around with it like that. Or you can load it all the way up and you can take away your fuel, and you can see now, watch how the weight, you know, allowed shifts. So if we go, you know, full fuel, which, you know, is theoretically 258 pounds in the wing, now in order to maintain that CG, you can see it shifts to 86 pounds. But you can say, okay, well, I'll allow flying with a CG of 41 inches. Then it says, okay, well, now you can put 140 pounds there at that point. So to do that, you can simply take your little Excel sheet here, zero everything out, and this is the actual original weighing configuration that I used. So when you weigh the tail wheel, if you've ever tried this, the difficulty is your equipment and your cradling system can develop a lot of errors in your tail wheel weight, and with an arm back there that far, it needs to be exact. So it's really good to have some way of cross-referencing it rather than just weighing it over and over and over again, you know, different ways 20 different times. But that has got to be exact, or in an S21 maybe slightly heavy. You can't be half a pound off on the underside of that, especially on an S21. So this was what it was weighed with a good, you know, reinforced cross member at 189.4 inches. So I measured this exact, and you can calculate, take your scale weight on your mains. There's a simple formula in here that's making sure in Excel that my total weight is matching reality, 981.4. That's what the aircraft weighs sitting in a takeoff configuration. So 85.4, what we need to know though, if we want to be able to use the RANS chart instead of using our own, is to not only weigh the tail wheel, but to cross references, we're going to calculate what the tail wheel weight should be. So since you already have this cute little formula in here, you can just take your empty CG that was weighed in reality at 36.57, and then your desired arm or loading point, you're just going to make your tail wheel arm. And so you zero out that, and then it's giving you 82. We'll just plug in 82. Now you can see what's happening here is up here, the issue is that the weight on these mains will change, and so your moments change, and so it's slightly off. So once you plug that in and all the numbers change, it's like, nope, you need to take 6 pounds off. So you can go 76 pounds, okay, slightly one more. So we'll go 75.9. Now, I do have the ability and a really good way to weigh the tail wheel on scales, and the actual weighed, these are the actual values of what it weighed in reality. But you can see by using this formula, we backed in, and that's close enough, and estimated the tail wheel weight at 75.9, and put on a scale, weighed 3 times, that is exactly what it weighed. But something else you can do is you can come in here, set up a block tail wheel weight calculation. The issue being these mains are going to change, so we just need to delete those, and the best way to do that is to make these represent 0. Now you can just come through here on Excel, and the reason you would want to use that formula for, you can use this for almost anything, but you're prone to get a lot of errors. This is somewhat difficult to keep all this straight unless you're in an Excel spreadsheet. But on an Excel, you can come through here and zero these out, which is going to make sure that no matter what these change to, you can essentially ignore them. And then it makes the math just simple algebra, because no matter what these change to, their moment will always be 0. But you can just come in here and take a simple formula. Right here, we need this moment. Let's just get this back to reality. And so on our initial weight, which was 85.4, that's our moment, right? So you can simply, if we zero these out, it's simple algebra, divide this by that. So we'll just come in here and make a calculated tail wheel weight. We're gonna be taking this block, so we'll come up here and say equals this block times this arm, and that will need to be in brackets, minus 22. And then you will take that answer, which is this moment, 22 inches shorter, and divide that by this minus 22, 210.4, or C12, 22. And that formula right there, you can see, gives you the actual mathematically perfect calculation of 75.88, 75.9. And in the real world, this in fact did weigh 75.9. And then you can come back in through here and check that number, even if you hadn't done it the other way. You can come back in here and check this number, and we'll just plug in 75.9, and our CG is 36.57, which is what it calculated in reality. This formula is matching up. You can't afford to add or lose any weight from the tail wheel. So that's a way that you can calculate your tail wheel and make sure that everything is dead on. So if you were to then actually weigh this is a good way to check your arms, and you come up with a different number here, than what you calculated, that means this arm is off, and then you can go to measure that arm and realize, well, it's actually 1 inch off or it's 2 inches off. And you can get this completely dialed in and have a real trustworthy CG. So you can just use that formula, but to calculate that tail wheel weight, just zero out your mains, make that your new datum line, move everything back, in this case by 22 inches, and you can get your tail wheel weight exact. Just simple algebra. Okay, so on your G3X weight and balance, for instance, this formula would be used when you want to add something like a baggage center. So we want to figure out, you know, this baggage center, this is all being programmed here, so it's got, you know, default values. But you could add an arm like that you wouldn't have, and you could figure out, your Garmin will throw an alarm if someone flying the airplane or the pilot exceeds this in configuration. So you can do your calculations using that formula and find all of your maximums as far as weight concerned. Now, if you're actually building the aircraft, there's all kinds of structural stuff that's going to limit that. So you're not going to actually always be able to hit maximum. So that would prevent someone from burning off all the fuel in the wings, for instance, and then getting in an aft CG scenario. The G3X will see that and it will alarm out. You know, it's going to show you that you're exceeding CG, the pilot, in loading the aircraft, because it'll show you your landing weight. And once you burn your fuel off, you could wind up aft CG. And so you can figure out how to maybe prevent someone from doing that anyways, and set the maximums by using that formula, calculating like with zero fuel in the wings and just, you know, burning off the header tank, which would be an extreme scenario, but, you know, likely to happen. Hopefully you can use it. It's extremely helpful to me, but like I said, this is common knowledge. I don't want to know.